Anchors in Regex. Let's continue learning about Regex by solving these code challenges. In this code challenge, you will need to implement the function validate username that expects one parameter username. Username may contain letters, digits, and underscore, and username must be within 5 to 12 characters long, and both these numbers inclusive, so it means that if our string contains 5 characters or 12 characters, they are also valid. And the function itself should return true or false. And now I will show you some of the example inputs. So the first input contains the word dragon, and we return true because this word consists only from letters, and the length of this word is 6, which means that this is a valid input. So the next input is dragon underscore 123. All these characters are valid, and also the length of this username is 10 characters. So and this is the reason why this is a valid input. Then we have a username AB, and this is too short, so this is invalid input. Then we have a username player with exclamation mark. For our function, the exclamation mark is an invalid symbol, and this is the reason why this input is invalid. And finally, we have a very long username that just consists more than 12 characters. So at first, I go to the website regex101.com. So here we can write our regex pattern. And then I put inside of the text string area all the example inputs. And now we remember that the first two ones are valid, and then we have 3 invalid inputs. And at first, you might think that this is a pretty easy challenge, so try writing a regex pattern your own. But then let's write it together. So at first, I start from selecting our flags. I think that at this point we can put the global flag. Even though that our function expects only one username, at this point we can check multiple inputs by using the global flag. Before copying this pattern into our code, we will deselect this flag. And also, I think that we can use the case insensitive flag because both the uppercase letters and lowercase letters are valid. So and then let's select the character class of all valid symbols. So at first I can select all letters, then also all numbers, and finally, I add underscore. And now we have a character class that consists of all valid symbols. Also, we have a shorthand for that, so if you want, you can write the \v, and if you hover over it, you will see that this is equivalent to exactly the same character class as we had before. But just for clarity, I will stay with a full version of a character class. So and then we see that each letter is selected individually, and this is because the default length of characters that we select is 1. So I explicitly wrote this quantifier, and now let's select the valid length. We know that the valid length is from the 5 symbols until the 12 symbols. So and this is a truly custom quantifier, and we don't have any shorthand for that. And now if we look to our inputs, we can see that we don't select the AB username anymore. Also from the player, we select only the valid part, and the same with the very long username, we select it with 2 parts. So the first one contains 12 characters and the second one contains 6 characters. And now let's think how to solve this challenge by using this pattern. At this point we know 2 functions, test and match. If you try to use match function, you will get an array of all matches from the match information tab. And here you see that we have usernames like player, but the actual username is player with exclamation mark. Or at the same time, from the last username, we have 2 matches. So at this point, our pattern selects only the valid part within the string. So it means that if we have an array of these matches, we will not be able to detect is it valid or not. The same if we use the test function, because test function returns true or false depending on do we have any matches or not. And if we have any matches, it means that this function will return true. And the problem that we have is, imagine we have only the input player with exclamation mark, and then this pattern selects only the valid part within the string. And eventually we have a match for player, which is really a valid username, but the problem is that the username that was provided from user was different. So what we actually want to select is, we want to select an entire string if this is valid, or we don't want to select anything. And for solving this kind of problem, we actually need to learn a new feature of regex, which is anchors. So we have 2 different types of anchors. So the first anchor is the caret symbol. It can be very confusing because at the same time we use the current symbol for not operator, within a character class. So this is important to understand. If I put a caret symbol inside of the character class, it will actually work as a not operator. So it will select all symbols except of this character class. But if you see the symbol outside of the character class, typically this is in the beginning of the regular expression. In this case, this is anchor. And when you hover over it, you can see that it asserts position at the start of the string. So what it actually means? At this point, we don't see any difference, but if I add an exclamation mark in the beginning of the string, you will see that we don't have any matches anymore. And this is because when we use this anchor, it actually selects a string that satisfies this pattern but starts from the beginning of the string. So with this anchor symbol, our pattern starts to scan the string from the beginning, then it sees the exclamation mark, so this is an invalid symbol, and this is the reason why it stops scanning the rest of the line. At the same time, if I remove this exclamation mark, you'll see that we select the player, and this is because we start the scanning from the beginning of this line, and then we select the first 6 characters because they are inside of the character class, and they also satisfy this quantifier, but then we see an exclamation mark which is not inside of the character class, which means that this is the end of our match. So, and at this point, Regex completes our scanning, and we have only one match, which is player. So no matter what I write after the invalid symbol, it will not be selected. So the second anchor that we have works in a similar way, but it starts from the end of the line. And now I need to use a dollar symbol, and if you hover over it, you will see that this anchor asserts the position at the end of the string. Now you see that with this anchor, we don't have any matches, and this is because we start scanning from the end of this line. The first symbol that we see is invalid, so we finish our scanning. But if I remove the symbol, or if I put it in the beginning of the string, you will see that we select the word player, but then we stop scanning when we reach the exclamation mark. And now what we commonly have, both these anchors at the same time. So this is a very common use case when we use both these anchors. And now we create a box where we select all the strings that satisfy our pattern. So basically now, no matter where I put the exclamation mark, in the end or in the beginning, if we have at least one invalid symbol within this line, it will not be selected. Now let's try another input, very long username. So at first, let's look to this input without any anchors. Now you see that we have 2 matches, and this is because of the quantifier. Then we also have common letters. They are inside of the character class, so we just select them as a separate match. Now I put the first anchor, and then you see that we have only one match. So we start scanning our string from the start of a new line, and then we see that all the symbols are valid. So we select the first 12 symbols, and the next symbol is also a letter. So this is inside of the character class, but it doesn't start from the beginning of a new line. And this is the reason why we stop scanning this line on this letter. Now let's try to use the second anchor, and now you see that we have a very similar situation. So we select the first 12 symbols from the end of the line, and then we have the letter L, which is inside of the character class, but this letter doesn't start from the end of a new line, and this is the reason why we stop scanning this line. And then when I use both these anchors, we create this box, and now an entire line must satisfy our condition. So we see that all the symbols are within our character class, so character class is satisfied, but then we have our quantifier that says that we might only have 5 until 12 symbols. On this line, we have 18 symbols, which is more than 12, and this is the reason why we don't have any matches. When we use both these anchors, we basically say that an entire line must satisfy the condition in order to be matched. And if any part, any single detail doesn't match the condition, we don't select anything. I hope that with these examples, you start to understand how anchors work, but don't worry if you don't understand them fully. It actually takes time to get used to the anchors. Now we can use this pattern for solving our challenge. But as I said before, we can remove the global flag because we want to validate only one username. I return back to our code, and now on the left side, you see 5 times the word undefined from 5 different console logs. And now it means that we are connected to the browser and we can start solving our challenge. So at first, let's add the pattern inside of this function. Then we need to use one of the regex functions. So we know 2 functions, match and test. And in this case, because we want to check just one word, I think that we can use the test function. And now let's return the result of the test function. And then in the console, you can see true, true, and false, false, false. So these are actually the results that we have expected, and this means that our function works correctly. Now let's continue with the next challenge. In this challenge, you have a function extract to-do lines that expects one parameter text. So this is a string that might contain several lines. And this function should extract all to-do lines from the input text. Each to-do must start at the beginning of a line. And the function itself should return an array of to-do lines. And this is the first example input. So you see that we have a to-do create login. Then we have the \n symbol, which means a new line. Then you see done with profile, so we don't select it. And then we again have a new line. And then you see the second to-do fix menu. And the outcome is an array of two strings. The next example is similar, but here we have only one to-do. So in the array, we have only one to-do line. And then we have an example where we have to-do, but it doesn't start from a new line. So we return an empty array. Now I added the first example input into the text string area. And then you can try writing a pattern that will select only to-do lines. So from this input, it should find 3 matches. But before you start writing this pattern, I want to show you one symbol. In Regex, we have a dot, and if you hover over it, you will find that this is a shorthand that matches any character except of the new lines. So this symbol might be useful in solving this challenge, because after the to-do with column, we might have any text, and no matter what we have there, it will be valid. So now try writing this pattern yourself, but then let's write it together. So again, in the beginning, let's choose flags that we want to use. I think that this time we can add only the global flag, but actually if you add case insensitive flag, it will not be wrong, so you can use it. But I think that I will solve this challenge in the way that I want to select only to-dos in uppercase. So then let's write to-do inside of the pattern. And now you already see that we have 3 matches. But also I want to select the rest of the line, and for that I can add dot and then I can add plus. So, and now we use 2 shorthands. So dot means a character class of any characters, and then plus is a quantifier from 1 until unlimited. And also you see this white slide border around the dot, which means that this quantifier is attached only to our character class. And basically you might think that this is the solution for this challenge, but then I also add one example input that currently is selected, but that actually shouldn't be selected. And this is because in the description of our function, we had this line that to-do must start at the beginning of a new line. Currently you know about anchors, and you know that we have a caret symbol for putting an anchor that requires this pattern to be from the beginning of a new line. But if I try to use it, you will see that we have only one match. And this is because by default, if we use anchors, they scan only one line. But if you want to scan multiple lines, we need to add a new flag. And this flag is called Multiline Flag. And here in the description, you see that both these anchors match start and end of line. So basically, if you activate this flag, you will see that currently we have only 3 matches and we don't select the last to-do anymore. So now you can use this pattern for solving the challenge. Again, try solving it yourself, but then if you have any problems, compare your solution with mine. I'm connected to the browser, and now you see undefined in our console. At first, I add our pattern inside of this function. I will use the match function because match function returns all matches that we have inside of the array. And now we need to remember that match function can return a null or an array. So if we don't have any matches, it will return a null. So at first, let's handle null. And now you see that if we have a null, I return an empty array, and then in the else statement, I return the match result. And now if you look to the console, you will see that these answers are absolutely the same as the answers that we have expected. So it means that our function works correctly. Today you learned about anchors in Regex. And also you learned how to validate multiple lines if you use anchors. In the next video, we'll learn about word bounding in Regex.